How do you start from zero and become an expert in MongoDB? Or maybe you are already on your learning journey and you want to know what is the next skill that will make you move forward. In this video, we'll have a look at what you should focus on first if you are a beginner, and once you've mastered the fundamentals and acquired solid foundations, we'll have a look at the advanced topic that you should consider learning, and eventually, if you want to consider yourself an expert, what are the skills and areas of knowledge you should possess. So, of course, MongoDB is one of the most popular NoSQL databases out there, if not the most popular. And being able to use it efficiently is a great skill to have, whether you want to build a scalable modern application or you want to get a job as a developer. So my goal with this roadmap is to give you a clear path to follow, but you can also use it as a way of remembering what is possible to do with MongoDB. I personally use this roadmap as a way to keep track of my progress and encourage myself to keep learning. So you just started your journey and you don't know where to start. So first of all, you should understand and have an overview of what MongoDB is, the pros and cons, knowing the difference between SQL and NoSQL, because this is kind of a reason why you would choose MongoDB over other type of databases. So it's good to have an understanding of that. And if you want to know why it's so popular, I've made a video to talk about that, so you can go check it out. I'll put a link in the description. Then once you know what MongoDB is, you should get familiar with the core concepts. So what is a MongoDB server? What's a database? Inside the database, you have collections. In those collections, you have documents. So those are kind of the core concept of MongoDB. It might be good to also understand what is the JSON data format. It will help you later understand some of the specificity of what type of query you can do. And then in most cases, if you are a developer, especially, you would want to know what the driver is. You have a Node.js driver, but you also have C#, Java, and other driver for different programming languages. I've put Node.js here because that's what I use, but obviously you can pick whatever is relevant for you. Then you have the tooling. So you have to know how to install MongoDB on your local machine to start working with it. So you'll have the MongoDB shell. So it's a CLI tool. You can send some command to your MongoDB instances and start playing with it. You have MongoDB Compass, which is a graphic interface that you can use to interact with your databases, and Studio 3T, which is another graphical interface. So personally, I use those two, the MongoDB shell and Compass, but again, feel free to use whatever tool you prefer in your setup. So these are kind of the most basic stuff you should start with, and at that point you should be able to start interacting with your data and play around with it. And you will start with the CRUD operations, so creating documents, reading documents, updating them, and deleting them. For that, you'll have a few commands you will need to learn about to insert, query your document. So you can find one document, find multiple documents. You have some commands to delete document and update document. So you can go through the documentation and learn a bit more about those. And for querying, what is important to know is the query operations. So you have different types of operations. Here I have grouped them in different categories. So you have some operations to select what you want to see in the result of your queries. You have some logical operators here, etc. So you can go and have a look at all those type of operators and start playing around and see how to build queries and fetch data that are stored in your servers. Something that is important to understand as well, especially when you work with arrays and embedded document, is the dot notation. So that will allow you to make some queries on those array items and documents. And that dot notation as well will be used when you update array items and embedded documents. So that's a good concept to know about. So at that point, if you know what MongoDB is, if you know how to set up your local environment and use some basic tools, you can connect to a database, and you can do those basic CRUD operations, you could consider yourself as a junior level, and you can move on to the next step of your journey, which is the senior journey. So what you can start with is to learn about MongoDB aggregations. So the aggregations are ways to build more powerful queries and operations, and you build those by constructing a pipeline, and that pipeline has different stages, and you have different type of stages. Here again, this is just a subset of the many stages you can build. You can have stages to query your document and limit the number of results you have. You can search, you can skip document, you can make changes to what is the output of your pipeline by using the project keyword here, etc. And inside those pipeline stages, you have some operators you can use. You can have like accumulators operators, like calculating the average, for example, or logical operators, etc. So you'll see there is a little bit of an overlap between the operators for aggregations and the operators for your basic queries, but they are not exactly the same, and they don't always behave exactly the same way. So it's important to know about that distinction as well. Once you've learned about aggregations, you can also learn about some advanced CRUD operations. So you can start learning about transactions, cursors, read-write concerns, retries, regex, etc. You might not use all of those things, but it's good to know about them. For example, regex, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using that, depending on your use cases. But yeah, just knowing that there is that option there, it's always good. So now you can build powerful queries. You have other tools, and you have a better understanding on what MongoDB is and some of the internals as well, like read and write concerns. You can start learning about indexes. So what you will often find is that in some cases your query might be slow, and having indexes and building indexes can be a way of improving the performance of your queries. So you should know about the different types of indexes, like compounded indexes that apply to different fields, single field indexes, multi-key indexes, etc. So here, at that point, you know how to build powerful queries, you know how to improve the performance, but the next stage is actually deciding what data you will have in your database and how that data is organized. So that's when you should consider learning more about data modeling. So you'll have to define the schema of your data. Topics like normalization versus denormalization. Then you can check out schema validation, which is a way of, if you have documents in the collection, you can check them against a schema, and topics like data consistency as well. Here I've just listed a few other features of MongoDB you can look at. So gridfs to store files, change streams, cap collection, time series, etc. So again, these might not always be relevant for you, but it's good to know of them and dig deeper if you want to gain more understanding. So at that point, if you are able to, with all those topics and all those knowledge, you should be in a position where you can build applications with MongoDB, because you will know how to build complex queries, you will know how to improve the performance of your queries, and you'll have also some extra understanding on the internals of MongoDBs, like the cursor and read and write concerns. And on top of that, you will also need you also be able to understand what is a good data model for your use case and what are the best practices when you are doing some schema design. Then moving on to the next stage of your journey, which will take you from a senior to a expert in MongoDB. So at that point, you will need to consider subjects such as security. Who can access your data? What can they do? Is your data stored in a safe way? Does it use encryption? How are people going to be able to connect securely to your servers and access your data? So those are the kind of topics you should consider learning to become an expert. Server administration is also one important topic. So you will need to understand how, because from now, if you've just been working on your local machine, obviously you will have potentially applications that run on production servers. So how do you deploy your server to production, and how you monitor them to see what's happening? And also you'll need to understand a bit more about backup, because yes, sometimes things can go bad, so you need some way of having some backup and recover if something bad happened to your data. And if you are lucky enough to work in a very successful company or an area where you have to deal with scale, that's something you should also look into. So what is replication? What is sharding? And if you are doing replication, understand about replica set, the election mechanism, how do you roll back, and how do you connect to a specific replica set as well. If you are doing sharding, understanding what is a shard key, what are the different strategies to use to do sharding. By the way, for those who are unfamiliar with those subjects, basically replication is having copies of your data in multiple servers, and sharding is having slices of your data in different servers. Let's say if you have, users from the UK, you could decide to store them on one server. And if you have users based in the US, you could decide to store them in another server as well. It's a way of segregating data using a shard key. And in this case, the shard key would be their country. And again, to consider yourself an expert, you should have awareness of even more features that MongoDB offers. For example, geospatial indexes, full text search abilities, and TTL indexes. Basically is an index that you can set, and it will automatically delete some document after a certain period of time. And then, of course, you can go over many more subjects. Here I've only mentioned some of them. MongoDB connectors, for example, how do you make connection between your data and Kafka, or topics such as data migration. Maybe you already have data in an SQL database and you want to migrate that data to MongoDB. How do you do that? Or even inside MongoDB, you want to move from one schema to the other. So how do you deal with these kind of topics? Those are kind of topics that are relevant to other types of databases as well, but it's always good to know. Then you have cloud solutions like MongoDB Atlas that you can look into. So instead of maybe managing everything yourself, delegating some of that to a cloud solution is a very popular option as well. But if you do that, then you have to understand what are the features offered by the different cloud providers. So at that point, if you know all about that, you could consider yourself an expert. So your goal as an expert really is to understand how to keep your data safe, how to handle extreme load. So if you have a lot of users accessing your data for your application, how do you deal with that? Making sure everything is working correctly by monitoring, knowing where to see the logs of the application. Because if you are the expert in your organization, people are going to come to you when things go wrong. So you should be able to provide answers, right? So you should be able to fix things, to optimize things, to improve, because if everything is slow and it turns out it's because of the query inefficiencies or the way the data is organized, you are the one that will need to solve this kind of problem. So you will have to define an overall strategy as well, because other people will look up to you to see what are the best practices. So you'll have to provide that as well. And of course, being aware of the different features, because let's say you need to do like a text search, instead of implementing that in an ad hoc way, you should be aware that there is a full text search ability with MongoDB, and you can leverage that to provide that feature. So after all of that, you should now be able to consider yourself a MongoDB expert. Hopefully, you should now have a clear idea on what you need to learn to become an expert in MongoDB, but don't be scared or intimidated by the amount of topics and things to learn, because you don't need to learn everything or know everything to be able to use MongoDB efficiently, but at least now you have the big picture and you can choose what are the best topic or the most relevant topic to your use cases and your goals. And I will be posting regularly on this channel about MongoDB and other software development topics. So if you liked this video, you could consider subscribing, and I will make sure to help you in your learning journey.